Hello, everybody, to the Average Bros Gym podcast, where your hosts with eerily similar names, Corey and Croy, walk you through fitness, health, and life advice, which seeks to meet you where you're at. No polarizing black and white takes, no threatening you, and telling you the only way to do things, just genuine advice and good conversation. You may have noticed that Corey is not here. He is on vacation this weekend, so I will be doing a solo episode today. And kind of thought I want to talk about a little bit more about fitness barriers, right? Things that pop up that prevent people from seeking fitness, health, and wellness in a lot of different ways. These can be very, very varied and very depending on who's seeking this help, and so it helps to have a little bit of just some strategies to kind of work around those things. And so I'd like to talk about a little bit about that today. As listening to this pod, think about what has prevented you from joining a gym in the past or from working on your health and wellness. Kind of what does that look like to you, and kind of has that, what has that done to dissuade you from getting into the gym? Kind of how have you overcome those things, or how have you maybe still not overcome kind of what you're working on? So I want you to think about that as we go through the podcast today. But yeah, think about that. So one of the first things that we want to discuss when we talk about barriers is, of course, price. So fitness can be relatively expensive, right? So just looking over some group fitness, numbers, and this is from the local area of Twin Cities. And keep in mind that if you're living elsewhere in the world, these numbers are going to be different, especially, on the East and West Coast. We're talking about United States, right? Where rent prices are going to be higher, and therefore a lot of those memberships are going to be higher as well. So a couple group fitness places around the area, we're looking at, let's say we're looking at unlimited membership, right? So you'd be coming in, as much as you'd like. Many CrossFit gyms are going to be anywhere from about $179 to about $225 or so. Keep in mind that if you want to do personal training on top of that, it's going to be a little bit extra that you're paying in as well, depending on the studio, depending on the space. And so baseline membership, CrossFit gym membership, probably like anywhere from 150, 60, 70-ish to over $200, right? So right about there, that's a big commitment you're making to your health and wellness. A lot of other studios, $149 a month, $199 a month. There's one studio that looks like it's $95 every 2 weeks for unlimited membership, limited, fitness. So it looks like every month is probably about $189. And then you've got, if you're buying sessions, some of these places don't have a recurring monthly membership. They say, okay, well, if you want to come in 30 times a month or 20 times a month, let's say if you wanted to come in, 30 times a month, you're coming in, the price for that one is $255 for a certain fitness boutique gym around the local area, right? So that's $255 for 30 sessions a month. So it's essentially unlimited, right? Because if you were doing every single day, you had unlimited, classes, but there's lower tiers, of course, right? But if we're talking about coming in, let's say you want to come as many times as possible for a month, that would be unlimited, 30 sessions for $255. Now, some of the other areas, those are group fitness places. So we're looking at something that's more of a, you go in and you do your workout, right? Box gym, as they're called. So we've got Lifetime anywhere from $72 to $219 a month, depending on the studio. So if you are a member at Lifetime, you do know that there are different levels or tiers of Lifetime memberships. So certain studios will be a little bit cheaper on a monthly rate. Other studios will be probably pricier depending on the amenities they offer, as far as, tennis courts, swimming pools, all the other stuff, right? So depending on what you want to do, that's going to be more expensive. If we look at places that are a little bit more affordable, Anytime Fitness, anywhere from like $45 to $65 a month. LA Fitness, anywhere from $35 to $55 a month. And then, of course, the meme is always Planet Fitness, right? Like $10 a month. And that can be anywhere from $10 to $25, depending on where you are. So those are kind of the box gyms. Now, if you're going to be paying, so when I was working for Lifetime back in 2017, 2018-ish, you had personal training and you had GTX group fitness classes on top of your membership already. I've seen a couple people say that that is now part of the membership. So if you have unlimited access to GTX as part of the membership, that's a little bit more, in my opinion, cost effective, a little bit more bang for your buck, versus when I was coaching or when I was working there, it was kind of saying, well, okay, well, you got your standard membership, but then if you do any group fitness classes outside of that as like a GTX, right? Like a group strength, alpha, things like that, that's on top of that. So if they've changed that policy, then that's a little bit more cost effective, but still, anywhere from, $100 to $200 a month a plus depending on where you're going. Yeah, so I mean, you can see that like an easy barrier to list right away is cost. It's a lot of money for a lot of people, right? And so, how are some ways we can get around that, right? Of course, you can always look at your monthly spending. Hey, can I cut this from this? Can I cut from this? Depending on if you're a parent and you've got childcare, that's a very, very big cost, right? So first off, okay, maybe I can't cut that. You've also got your bills. You have to keep the bills on. You got your electricity, your gas, your internet, all your water, all the things, right? And of course, rent. Depending on if you're doing mortgage, renting, whatever that is, that's a cost that you can't really cut. You can't cut those costs, right? I know for me, I've always worked in gyms, so that's been a little bit of an easier sell for me because you usually get a membership when you're working out there, right? So my fitness has always been paramount as a person who works in the fitness industry. So I've always kind of put that ahead of other things, right? I think we're looking at a lot of like kind of superfluous spending. If you're someone who likes to, get new clothes, things like that, you can always cut those down. It's like, hey, I'm going to get one pair of jeans a month, not 2 or 3, right? I'm trying to buy jeans right now, and those motherfuckers are like $100 some dollars, $30, and they probably always have been, but I just didn't buy jeans very often. So that's a big expense right there. That's a membership right there, effectively. If you're doing like LA or like anytime, that's like 2 memberships that you're paying for one price of jeans. So that's one thing, right? Let's say you don't have a problem with superfluous spending, but it's just a cost, an issue of, hey, you work 1 or 2 jobs or something like that, and it's tough to make ends meet. You've got kids to feed, things like that too, right? There is a very strong socioeconomic barrier for a lot of people as well. And so I want to think about fitness as less of, hey, I need to be having a membership at this gym, and more so I can do things at home. And yes, that's not as like attractive sometimes, but it's like if you were completely untrained, so let's say you hadn't worked out in a very long time, or let's say you just never worked out, even doing like beginner programs on YouTube or we used to, back in the day, we would just be browsing forums online, right? These bodybuilding.com forums, all these things. Even doing that and doing like squats per day, sit-ups a day, if you can do push-ups, obviously push-ups per day, things like that of nature, even walking steps up your house. I remember when I was trying to get very lean back in the day, I would get done with work. This was probably when I was early 20s, I mean, even late teens. And I would throw on a hoodie and I would just walk my steps in my parents' house for about 25 minutes, right? And so, yeah, that's not like a super attractive option, I think, for a lot of people. But if that's what it takes to get you moving, and keep in mind, walking is one of the best things you can do for your body, especially if you're untrained, especially if your movement is very lacking. Walking around the block, rocking around the block twice, walking whatever, parking further away. These things are all things we can start doing to start improving our fitness without the need of a gym membership. And once you get into a rhythm with that, let's say you're doing that 2 or 3 times a week. Let's say you have a minimum daily step count that you're hitting. Let's say you are doing like Monday, I'm going to do, push-ups and squats for 10 minutes, or I'm going to do like a yoga video on YouTube, like a beginning yoga video on YouTube or something like that. Like if you have access to that and you can do that 2 to 3 times a week consistently, well then maybe, okay, well now it's been this time. Maybe I can shell out that, $20, that $45, that $65, whatever. And if that sticks and you're able to utilize that, some people might never need more than that. Some people want a little bit more of the group fitness aspect, which is going to be more expensive. One thing with group fitness is that they have to be led by a coach or led by a trainer. So you got to pay that trainer. So a lot of the time they're built around that experience as well, of like, hey, you've got someone there coaching you through this workout. And that expertise, that experience is worth X amount of dollars more. So group fitness is always going to be more expensive in that regard. So it's not for everybody. But I think that the quality of that workout is large as well. So you have to kind of look back and forth to say, okay, well, am I motivated by myself? Am I motivated by this or that? Working with a coach, working with a trainer is also going to be an additional cost as well. So that pricing kind of goes into all of that, right? But you have to start that way. You can start moving your body as many times a week as you can, doing gardening, doing walking, doing, if you like, whatever that is, you know what I mean? And make it interesting for you. If you like taking walks on a lake, do that. Go to the Como Zoo, whatever you want to do. Just move your body and, add in a little bit of fitness here and there. And I think that's a big kind of workaround from cost. And maybe after you've done that consistently, you feel more comfortable moving some of the money you spend per month over to those issues, right? But like I said, it's going to be different for everybody. I know that my spending habits are less restricted than someone who does have, kids, and they have to buy new clothes and new shoes, and they have to pay for preschool, and have to pay for daycare and things like that too. So look at kind of what you can manage, and sometimes that might be starting off just solo doing your thing. You know what I mean? And that's okay, because that's still working on your fitness. And if you're consistent with that, I mean, there's you can do a lot of that. I mean, there are people who only work out at home. You know what I mean? They only do X, Y, Z. And typically those at-home programs are going to be less pricey because you are relying on yourself. So if you have that motivation, awesome, go for it. So another barrier to exercise or fitness is kind of people will discuss is lack of time, right? This kind of plays into cost a little bit, where if you have a family, you're going to have less time, free time on your own, right? Let's say, especially if you work multiple jobs, things like that too, right? So those are all playing a factor. There's always some sort of sacrifice in there, right? And so a lot of those same, let's say you do pay for membership, but you're only doing it, twice a week. Well, first off, that's great. You're doing more than nothing. You know what I mean? A lot of people, more than a lot of people as well. And if you can be consistent with twice a week, that's amazing. Now, is it going to are your gains or your fitness levels going to improve if you're working out more consistently, more regularly? Perhaps, if you're being smart about it. But as far as time goes, you can supplement those things, right? Let's say you work 6 days a week. A lot of people do. On your off day, can you get in at least that one workout? Do you have time before or after to get in your workout here? If you know that you're always tired after a long day, or unless you have a physical job, right? Can you get in a workout prior to that? It does not have to be an hour workout. I think we think a lot of times of has to be 1 full hour of fitness, or it's not worth my time. I am guilty as well of going to the gym and thinking, oh, well, I got to be at work at this time, and I'm only going to have X, Y, Z to 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So what am I might as well not go, right? I've done that in the past, several times, right? And it's the idea, I think, sometimes too, if you're going to a gym, is I got to get in the car and drive. Then I drive here, and then just take 15 minutes to get there. Well, if I have 15 minutes there, well, then, blah, blah, blah. And you talk yourself out of it before you even start, right? So you hear stories about people I didn't have a plan. I had to get to the gym. That was my one goal for the day. I had to get to the gym. And if I didn't go in, do anything, I think Corey's talked about this in a previous episode, at least I got to the gym, right? So think about what time you do have. You know what I mean? If you are watching a television program, you're watching something on Netflix, whatever, you can, fit in something, movement during that. Will it be the most optimal movement in the world? No. But that's okay. I think we try to optimize too many things in our life in general, not just fitness, but for sure fitness as well. It's what can I do in this 40-minute time frame that's going to give me the best possible workout? And it's not always going to be the case. Life is not just perfectly set up for that. And I think we all know that. So with the lack of time, I think you'd be honest with yourselves as well. What am I spending my time on? I know that, sometimes for me, let's take the example of watching TV on Netflix, or watching a program on Netflix, or watching a movie, right? So how many times do people tell you, oh yeah, you got to watch this movie? And you're oh yeah, for sure, I'll go watch Dune. And then your head, oh, I'm not fucking watching Dune. I'm not doing that. How many times have you, maybe not Dune, but any other, whatever movie. And you do that because it's a lack of time. You're saying, I don't have an hour and a half to kill, right? I know that I've done that for television shows. Oh man, this show just came out, you should go watch it. Shogun, or is a newer one. Apparently it's really good. And I'm oh yeah, sure, for sure. But then you're you think about the hour of a television show that you want to sit down and watch. I just don't have the time. My ass watches like hiking videos on YouTube for like an hour at a time. You know what I mean? Like and so it's like you perceive this lack of time to do a certain thing, but then you end up spending that time elsewhere where you could change that up. Like this is what reading does for a lot of people. They say, "Oh, I don't have time to read these books. I'm listening to an audiobook." Um, Shout out Meg who's listening to an audiobook right now for her books. And I'm doing the same thing right now, but it's like, okay, well, rather than me watching this maybe TV show or watching this thing for 30 minutes, I could read for 30 minutes. You could read for 10 minutes. You could read for 5 minutes. But I think there's that psychological investment of like, well, if I can only read for 5 minutes, I might as well not do it. Oh, if I'm only going to read for 10 minutes, I might as well not do it. I might as well watch TikTok on my phone for 10 minutes, right? So you spend your time doing these other things, but then you perceive that as a lack of time for your desired goal. So with fitness, it works the same way. If you have 15 minutes to watch something on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, which I'm putting myself in this category. If you have 15 minutes to do that, you have 15 minutes to bust out a quick bodyweight workout. And you can look at these up. You can find your favorite online content creator. You can find your favorite person, whoever. I'm guarantee you they put out something. If they're a fitness professional, they put out something like that, right? We could put out something like that if you want. Let us know in the comments if you want something like that. But that's the lack of time piece. And maybe things change and eventually your kids get a little older and they stop relying on you for everything, right? Because when they're very young, obviously you need to be around them at all times pretty much. And so maybe you do find that time later on, and you do have that hour to go to a fitness class. So I think it's like that's also that mental state of like, man, I gotta do this way or else it's not worth doing. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case. You can go for a 5-minute walk up and down your stairs, around the block, whatever it is. I'm not saying it's glamorous, but it is going to improve your fitness, and it is something you can do if you don't have that time, right? Otherwise, maybe take a log of like what time you are spending. When I wanted to get cable as a kid, because my parents never had cable until I was like 13, 14, which I think is probably normal for a lot of people. I mean, even just getting cable or satellite is like a privilege in the first place. So we get out of the way. But my dad made me like log on my television watching habits to make sure that I wasn't doing too much before they got cable, because they figured that as soon as we get that, like my viewing habits are going to go up, right? So it was made me do it myself. And so I definitely wrote it down and did all those things. So that's something you can think about as well, is making a log for how you're spending your time now and go from there. And you want to avoid the optimization of like, okay, well, if I had 10 minutes to do this, 10 minutes to do that, but it's just worth looking at. Okay, so that's time. Hopefully I answered some of the questions there or gave you some workarounds for time. Another thing that we talk about with fitness is like we're shopping around or thinking about it, right? So this is something that as a fitness professional, I get a lot as far as when people come in and try their first workout and you talk to them afterwards, like, okay, cool. Like, you been thinking about joining a gym for the last 5 years because you were, during COVID, you kind of got out of the habit, and then before you know it, 5 years have passed, you haven't been doing anything, right? Happens all the time. And you still got people that, quit their gyms or their gyms closed during that time and they haven't really gotten back into a fitness routine, right? Very, very normal. And so you get that and they're like, oh, well, I want to think about it a little more. And I respect that because I obviously don't want to push a little button too much. But at the same time, it's like, well, you've had 5 years, so what is there else to think about? And I think I want us to be a little bit more conscious of, okay, what do I truly want out of a fitness routine? So if your barrier is kind of like you're just never really starting because you're always thinking about trying to find the best thing, or you're trying to find the thing that works best for you, give yourself maybe a week or so, or 2 weeks to say, hey, this is my trial period. At the end of this time, I am choosing something. Or if you take a class or you go to a gym and you're like, man, this was fucking awesome, I love this, pull the trigger. There's never going to be a perfect scenario. There's never going to be a perfect choice. People talk about this a lot with like kids and things like there's never a perfect time, right? Things will never be optimal. But if you can stick to a routine when things are not optimal, then when things are better, you're already in that routine. right? That you've already shown yourself you can do that. So the wanting to think about it, let's look at why, like what you're actually thinking about. You know what I mean? I think that's a buzz phrase for a lot of people. I want to think about it. Like, oh, what do you want to think about? Answer that question for yourself. What is there to be looking at? Is it that you're not confident in your own ability to maintain a routine? That's a fair thing. But if you never try, you never give your chance the opportunity to do that. You know what I mean? If you say, "Oh, I'm not sure I can kind of maintain a consistent routine," so you never join anything, well, then you're never giving yourself the opportunity to do that, right? Unless you're doing that at home really consistently. But if you're doing that, you're probably ready to take it to the next level anyway. You know. So think about what that is. Or do you not have confidence in the facility? Maybe you liked it, but you came in on a day that was like, it was like 5 p.m. It was right after work and it was really busy. And you're just like, I don't really like people that much. I get that. So think about, okay, well then maybe you're looking for a different time that you can come in. Or maybe you're looking for a different gym that is not as busy. Maybe it's worth driving 5 more minutes to this other place that you think is gonna be a little bit less crazy at 5 p.m. Or maybe you can get up a little bit earlier, come to the gym before work, if that works for you. Maybe it's a little bit less busy at 6 a.m. than it is at 5 p.m. Then yeah, getting up early kind of sucks sometimes, depending on who you are. I know I have had to adapt to being somewhat of a morning person. I can never really fall asleep at the earliest time, but I can get up early. Our earliest class is 5 a.m. I get up for it about 3:30. So what can you work around there? In Gosh, I can't remember if this is Do Hard Things. Yeah, I think it's Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. We talk about barriers to things, right? And a lot of times we want to kind of like smash through that barrier. And really, it's like the best way to do is you go around it, because you're faced with a barrier, and so we kind of make it even bigger and more massive in our heads as far as a concern or something we feel like it's not going to work out, and we never think of a solution, right? It's like that barrier is going to be there regardless. So rather than thinking about I have to push through this and just put my head down and just dig into it, let's figure out a solution around it, right? So when you want to think about a fitness routine, that's something that you want to kind of think about is like, what do I actually want to think about? What actually worries me or frightens me or dissuades me from joining a gym or getting into routine? And maybe you take a class and you're only like the coach, or you don't like the trainer, and it's just like doesn't really vibe for you. That's a legitimate concern. But don't let that be the case where it's like, okay, well, I tried this place, I didn't care for the workout too much, so now it's gonna be another 5 months before I try something else. Now keep trying. Give yourself that 2-week period where you're looking at different methods of fitness, maybe. So that's a thought about the kind of wanting to think about things and how that's a barrier to starting. And I think I think a lot of the time it is sort of like I don't know the right word for it, but it's the trepidation. It's kind of like a fear. I think sometimes you also have this fear of failure, right? That could be another barrier. As maybe fitness, you've tried it a lot in the past. Maybe you said you were, last time you look at some of these gyms here, like maybe you were an LA Fitness member for a year, and then you never really quite got to where you wanted to be. And then maybe you join at any time because you maybe started working later, and you're like, I can work out at 10 p.m. after I'm done with my night or my evening shift or whatever that is. But maybe that didn't work out for you. So maybe you said, well, I need accountability. I'm going to join a fitness class. So maybe you joined Base Camp or Orange Theory. Probably not our studio. Studio is great, but anyways. So maybe you join one of those fitness places. There was a studio, and you love the accountability. But maybe something happened along the line, and maybe you started coming 4 or 5 times a week. Bam, awesome, getting consistent, getting regular. Okay, well then maybe here and there you missed a day because this happened. And all of a sudden you're only coming 3 times a week. Well, now something else happened down the line. Maybe something's going on with the family, and then all of a sudden you're going 2 times a week, and then it's 1 time a week, and then you're not seeing the results. Like, oh man, this isn't working for me anymore. So you quit. So there's that fear of that failure as well happening. Maybe it's like, man, I just can't get it right. And I think that's a very real fear as well. And I think it's important to realize that like fitness is a lifelong pursuit, and you're never going to be perfect at it. I've had times where I haven't worked out for 2 weeks. I've had Right now my current routine is probably 2 to 3 times a week, 4 max. And that's like consistent getting into the gym, whether I'm doing, a couple of Orange Street classes and maybe some weightlifting outside of that. But that's like in purposeful intent of an exercise. And that's not counting maybe like I'm going for a walk or I'm going for, I don't know, a hike once it gets nicer outside, right? Right now it's kind of like it's muddy mess amalgamation of mud and straw and all that other shit outside. Straw, I don't know where that came from. I don't know. Am I hiking in Litchfield? I don't know. So that's like a small town in the West, if you didn't know about Minnesota. So think about kind of too that it's okay to fail. It's okay to, or just because you fell out of love with this gym or just because you fell off the wagon does not mean you failed. You own Jordan Syatt, I believe it was Jordan Syatt. Good guy, follow him on Instagram if you haven't yet. One of the fitness influencers or people online that I really do actually believe in. Says you can't F this up, you can't fuck this up, right? You only fuck it up by not trying, by giving up, saying I am done with it, whatever, right? Because everybody's gonna make mistakes. Everybody's going to be training quote unquote suboptimally. Everybody's going to be falling off the wagon. The important thing is you keep trying, right? Whether that's finding a new space for yourself, whether that's giving yourself that grace of saying it's okay if I'm doing like at-home workouts for a couple weeks while I figure things out, right? If you need to put your membership on like a hold, or maybe you're saying, oh, I'll come back when I'm a little bit more, when I'm ready for it. But we got to keep trying. We got to be accountable to ourselves. And I think that's what's going to be the big difference there. Okay, so a lot of barriers are there. Let's take a little bit of a break. I'm going to play like a cool little thing on the thing here, and then we're going to come back. All right, so we are back and we're going to be doing some more fitness barriers. This next one, I want to talk about nutrition a little bit, and this is going to be obviously like a hot topic. I am not a nutritionist. I'll say that right now. I know I ate Papa John's last night, so but I think a lot of my nutrition is very experience based. A lot of it is learning from people who do know more than me. And so I won't give specific recommendations, but I'll talk a little bit about kind of what my guidelines are and what people I give for people to talk, or what I kind of talk to people about when I'm meeting with them in a professional setting. So strategies for nutrition, I think a lot of the times people are either like, a couple things happen when people get into gyms, right? They start exercising. So typically, let's take one person. They haven't been working out for a while or doing things. They're too physically active. They've been eating, but let's say, I hope they've been eating. Let's say they do have weight loss goals, and their weight has stayed the same for a long time. Like, oh, I've been stuck here for a while. That's not a bad thing. Well, first and foremost, you're defined by more than just what your weight is. So let's remember that. But also, if your weight is stable, that means you're not going up or down. That's actually, you're probably eating right around your maintenance calorie level, right? So you're on the weekly average, you're averaging about maintenance calories. Let's say, just to make it easy, it's 2,000 calories, right? Okay, cool. So it's like you're eating right around 2,000 calories, give or take a little bit, but you're not going up or down in weight. Then it's probably a good idea or a good indication that you are eating at maintenance level, right? What happens to a lot of people is they start exercising. So like, okay, well, now I'm going to join a gym. I'm going to get my health in check. I'm going to drop my last 10 pounds or whatever I want before XYZ, right? And this is a very stereotypical goal. Again, this is not everybody's goal, but I'm going to kind of walk you through this because this is a good example of kind of how nutrition can play a factor in kind of what we're doing and actually impede our fitness. So let's say this person's, eating 2,000 calories a day. Well, now they join a gym. They start working out consistently. Let's say doing it for 4 times a week. Awesome, great. Well, it happens a lot of the time is that people will start eating more because now they are exercising more. Sometimes they have an increased demand and hunger, and sometimes psychologically, it's like, okay, well, I'm exercising, so I can eat. I have a little bit more room. And while this is true, if you burn more calories in a day, you have essentially more room for caloric intake. If you're eating at maintenance, and you're not moving, right? So let's say again you're sedentary and you're eating at maintenance calories, so you're not going up and down in weight. Well, you start exercising more, so that overall calorie burn goes up every week. Great. But then if you move that dial for the nutrition as well, now you're still eating at maintenance. So I think what a lot of people get wrong is they'll start eating more to compensate for that, or to in conjunction with the exercise, and then nothing changes. So what that can lead to is a lot of frustration down the line. It's like, hey, I'm working out 5 days a week, I'm doing this or that, and like nothing's changing. It's been 2 months and I haven't lost a single pound, or I haven't done this or that. I don't see anything different. A lot of the time, so first off, you're going to see the cardiovascular changes and like the strength changes before you see changes in your body, right? So what adaptations, the longer they take to develop, they also, you lose them in more amount of time, right? So it's like your cardio, how many times have you been really consistent with cardiovascular? You're running, you're biking, you're whatever, you're swimming, and then you go on vacation for a week. You don't do anything on vacation because you're chilling, you're hanging out, you're living life. Come back, you're like, man, that first workout was so fucking hard. You're so out of breath. You're like, I used to be able to do this. Well, it's because that adaptation loses quickly. I mean, there's a little bit of variability in that, and also it's like it's not gone. You're going to get it back really right away. And also too, when you try to get an adaptation for the second time, or let's say you've already been like lifting X amount of weight, and then you have something happen to you and you have to take time off to come back. Like, wow, this is really tough. I can't do it. You're going to get that strength back faster than when you first acquired that strength, right? Same thing with cardio. So you're going to see those changes first. So people will get through their, they'll do their cardio and they'll do their strength. Like, man, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting faster. I'm less tired, but I'm just not seeing my body change. So first off, those physiological changes will take longer to show up. Secondly, again, if your caloric intake is now increased with your exercise and you're back at maintenance, but just a higher level of maintenance, like now my maintenance calories are 2,200, but I'm still eating 2,200 calories, then you're not going to see that weight change, right? You're not going to see that as much. You can still see muscle growth, especially when you are untrained and you can both kind of build muscle and burn fat at the same. Like there's a little bit of a difference in that. As you get more and more trained, it's harder to do that. But that will dissuade a lot of people from continuing on. They'll say, this isn't for me. I've been here 2 months and nothing's happened. I'm quitting. And so that itself is a big barrier to fitness, is actually working with nutrition in conjunction with it. A lot of times you'll hear, oh yeah, like abs aren't made in the gym, they're made in the kitchen. And I think you in the kitchen is where you kind of reveal the hard work, right? You put the hard work into the gym as far as like building muscle, changing the way your body composition looks, but that's revealed with a steady caloric deficit. And we'll get into too much of that because it's a little more complicated. Like you can't just keep eating at a deficit forever, obviously, because it just gets lower and lower. There's different things. There's different phases of both refeeding, of maintenance, things like that. And I will not touch on that a little bit too, because I just don't have the knowledge or the knowledge base for that, right? But I'm telling you what I do know, what I have experienced, what I talk to with people. So as far as that nutrition barrier, it's important to note that. I would say when you start an exercise routine, as long as you are comfortable tracking your food, one thing you can do really easily is to track like protein and track like fiber, right? So if you're saying to yourself, Croy, I don't want to track my macros, I want to track my caloric intake, that is too much. Or I don't know, there are some people that have different relationships with food. Obviously like eating disorders do impact people still long term. Some people don't want to track because they have a history of doing this, and even if they didn't have necessarily eating disorder, it has led, or like disordered eating, it has led to other things that have been very like uncomfortable for them as far as mentally and emotionally. So that's totally fine, right? I think there's other ways around that. So one way we can do this is by kind of hitting a protein intake and a fiber intake. I'd recommend to start things off, everybody having about at least 100 grams of protein a day. It's a really easy number to shoot for. It's a really easy number to just think about, like 100 grams. Like 100 is a very simple number, right? We do a lot of things in a space of 100. So that's one thing you can think about. Fiber, typically recommend 20 to 30 grams a day, somewhere in that range. Something that when I was working with Ellen, who was a guest on our 6th episode, I could really hardly get fiber. That was always really tough for me, probably because I was eating like shit. So, you're probably gonna need more than Taco Bell for fiber there, but that's something I think about: 20, 30 grams of fiber, as well as 100 grams of protein, right? So that's a way to track those two things without tracking calories that can still make a substantial impact on your nutrition, right? Because if you're hitting those things consistently, you're leaving a little bit less room for the other shit, right? So that's something I wanted to think about. I've also used the advice of like maintaining a food log. That's something that is really, really big because like it's a way to track without necessarily tracking the exact calories of things, right? But you can still look at that after a week and say, okay, well, it's been Monday to Sunday. Here's what I had. And you can say, wow, it looked like I was, pretty on point. I was eating like a serving of fruit and vegetables every single day, like Monday through Thursday. And then all of a sudden I get to Friday and, things go off the rails a little bit. That's normal. I know that I had a member a long time ago when I was working back in Plymouth, and he was coming in very consistently, and he was making a lot of changes as far as his exercise routine went, but wasn't losing any weight. And he was eating double the amount of calories on the weekends as he was on the weekdays, right? So it's like you can have a little bit of variance because you're going to, because like you're going to have fun, but it can't be that big of a variance because that's going to leave your entire average higher, and so you're not going to see that change you want. So that's another barrier, is this to nutrition and going along with that, and kind of what we can do to kind of help circumvent that. Another thing is like eliminating distractions while you're eating. Sometimes when people are watching TV, like you just don't like the hunger cues, like the satiety cues, don't quite hit the same. They hit different, if you will, or they don't hit at all. And so, I mean, like I can eat an entire box of Cheez-Its in one serving or in one sitting, and I have, but should I? Probably not. Who's to say? Not if I have other things on the rest of the day. So again, that is what you want to think about, is like you eliminate distractions. I would say turn off TVs, turn off TikTok, turn off whatever as much as you can. And if you have a partner or someone you're around, you can have dinner with them. It's a great time to reconnect with them as well, and also help you kind of feel more full rather than, going like binging a show and then all of a sudden like you've had more than you wanted to. You had a serving plus, right? Serving size, they're big on that. So yeah, that's the fourth thing, nutrition. Oh yeah. All right, perfect. So there's another one that we want to talk about is injury, right? Injury is a huge barrier to fitness. And it's really tough, right? Maybe you had an injury in the past, it's flaring back up, you had to quit your gym, things like that. Maybe you have been in PT for a long time, things like that too. So injuries are variable. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, right? And variety, like a lot of different severities. I've talked to people that had certain things happen like in their arteries, and they like literally, can't do overhead movements. People have, really consistent cases of joint dysfunction, things like that, right? Muscle strains, muscle pulls, recovering from surgeries, a lot of different things that can impact your fitness routine. So it's really easy to feel, if you've been coming back from this injury or still dealing with this injury, what do I do? Right? And I think what's good is that we are communication is a big thing. I know that I've really kind of bashed social media a lot. And I think a lot of that comes from my own bias and my own desire to be away from that mentality. But I think that connectivity is a positive in the sense that it's easier than ever to find specialties, right? People that, they have literally an amputated arm and they're still doing their fitness routine. I mean, Ellen works the guy in Victory Grips who, same thing. Like you have people that, make huge strides, regardless of what injuries they have or what areas of dysfunction they have. And so you want to look at, first off, finding maybe something that's going to suit you better, right? If you're coming back from very, very major surgery, you're probably going to make sure you're doing PT first, or outpatient, whatever therapy you're doing, and make sure you're getting a sign off on that from a doc. I think it's easy to feel discouraged, but just know that you can recover from these things. I remember when I had my ACL surgery back in the day, back when I was in college. And yeah, I mean, there were days where it's like, I had to get up and down stairs, I was like, I couldn't bend my knee. And that was definitely a big impact for me because physically or mentally you feel like I'm never gonna be able to do this again. And one thing that can help when you're coming back from certain surgeries, obviously, it was a little bit different. And this is, I'm talking from more of a, I guess, orthopedic um, level here, is that if you are, entrenched or working out in fitness prior to that, your recovery outcomes are usually a bit better, right? Because you've already been, there's sort of this resilience built up as far as like a hard work, like a mentality, like, okay, I know that this is going to feel this like this, versus if you're not engaged in fitness before when those things happen, it's harder to do that post, right? So that's a big indicator of a positive outcome post surgery is level of fitness prior to surgery. So that can really help. So if you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to have surgery, that'd be hurt for a while, well then get your ass in the gym. Start doing some fitness routines at home, whatever that is, that's going to help long term. But I think it's about finding the person that's going to work best for you. A lot of times I think when people are recovering from very, very devastating injuries, that having an individual coach is going to help. And obviously there is a cost added to that as well. So that is a barrier for sure. I think it's about trying things too, because I know that in our, like, let's say like Orange Theory, there's a formulaic approach to class, where it's like you're going to have time on the treadmill, you're going to have time on the rower, typically you're going to have time on the floor, right? For strength training, things like that too. So we do pride ourselves, and especially myself, being there for a long time on options, right? And I know a lot of other group fitness places do this as well. You got to find something maybe a little bit, I would honestly personally go for something that was a little bit less fast paced. Sometimes if you are on something that is like, they're giving out instructions here, then instructions there, then it's like just back and forth. You don't have time to like breathe, and you don't have a time for the coach to actually talk to you, then that's going to be a little bit less beneficial, I think, because you're just going to revert to whatever you know. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people that, they need so many options that if they don't have time to engage with a coach, they're going to be like, I'm just going to start doing bicep curls. And then how long is that going to really keep you in that routine, right? So I think it's important to find people that have maybe dealt with those before, whether that is online coaching, whether that's finding someone in the local area, whether that is, seeking referrals from your physical therapist or from maybe, someone in that field. I think that can be really beneficial as well. Or even saying, okay, well, the physical therapist has walked you through all this routine. Okay, well, what is in their experience, what is the best for me, right? So I know that we get a lot of options. I know that I try to do as much as I can. But I think make sure you have that injury diagnosed first. A lot of the times too, you get people like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with this shoulder thing for a long time. Okay, well, how long? Well, 3 months. Have you seen anybody for it? And I'll say, not yet. Like, why? And so I think also too, there's a mindset of like, oh, I'll be fine. I know I had that for myself too. I had a very bad low back injury for a long time, and it was 1.5 years of my injury. And because, well, one, I didn't have insurance at the time, so I didn't go see anybody for it. And then I also wasn't making a lot of money, so I was very broke. So I also didn't see anybody for it. So that's tough. But I maybe could have looked up some things online, but again, yeah, it's always a little bit iffy on that end. So understand, it's very understandable that people wouldn't seek help for those injuries. But let's say you have the ability to do that. Let's say you have health insurance, you have people you trust, whomever, right? So the important thing is that you seek to understand, because you can't fix something if you don't know what is broken, right? So that's a big thing as well. It's like if you feel something for longer than like a week or two, it's definitely worth seeing someone. I know that up front, that cost is a little bit more, in your face, but long term, you're going to give yourself some time to actually work on it and feel better long term. And that's going to help your fitness, because you're going to stay engaged, versus if you don't see anybody for it, all of a sudden 3 months go by, like, oh, I can't do anything anymore. I can't do any upper body anymore because this is give me an issue. And you haven't seen anybody for it, well, then you're going to quit that gym, right? Because you're like, well, maybe fitness is not for me. So there's a lot of things that we can look at in that regard as well, of like the injuries and like what is the severity of the injury? Have you sought any help for the injury? Are you coming off a surgery? Things like that. Those need more structure, obviously. Like I wouldn't have you come off a surgery and get right back into a group fitness class, depending on the surgery intensity, right? You want to make sure that you're what they're doing surgery on. You want to make sure you follow instructions. doc's orders, surgeon's orders, whatever, and seek second opinions if you'd like to from like physical therapists, things like that, orthopedic specialists. But important that you follow that, right? Those people go through a lot of school, they know what they're talking about. So look on that end. And then from there, I think like too, a lot of the time, and I hope to have my girlfriend Megan on the show. She's an occupational therapist, and a lot of times she sees people dealing with these very vulnerable issues of like these severe injuries they've encountered. And with occupational therapy, she works with like people that are in these fields and that they want to return to work, or maybe they don't sometimes, but they want to return to work, and you have to figure out if they're able to, right? So that's the whole physical therapist, occupational therapist's job, is to get you back into movement. So with those injuries, I think it's just very important to seek help from those who know more than us. And even myself, yes, I've been in the fitness industry for 10 plus years. And yes, I've been doing my own training since I was 13 years old. So at this point, at 19 years, right? But have I been to school for physical therapy or occupational therapy or any of that shit? No, I have not. So I can give you some options, but I couldn't tell you if it was the, Terry's minor that was in, there's only so much you can tell, right? So that can be a big barrier for fitness. So if that's you, if you're struggling with injuries, definitely seek help for that. If you already sought help and they tell you to do one thing, you just haven't done that yet, do it. Do the damn thing. Do your PT exercises as well. I'll never forget, there's a big meme among people that studied abroad. It's like they always talk about studying abroad. And I'm going to talk about studying abroad, but I tore my ACL, I believe, summer 2012, maybe, late summer 2012. And then, because then I studied abroad spring of 2013, like winter, spring of 2013. So I had about 6 months, maybe 5 to 6 months between when I tore my ACL and when I left for France. And I'd done physical therapy up through that point. I think there's like a month period where so you can't really do anything because you're just trying to get range of motion back in your knee. Anybody who's torn the ACL probably knows what I'm talking about. You can't start right away, right? You got to wait for even before the surgery, you got to wait for the swelling to go down, all that kind of shit. So, but I did my when I done that, and I was like, I'm going to France, but like I'm really dedicated to my physical therapy. I'm gonna keep doing it in France. I did not fucking do physical therapy in France. Okay, I wasn't doing my exercises at home. You know what I mean? I wasn't exercising at all, really, besides walking. I think I went for like a jog one time at a track, and I was like, God, that was tired. That was tiring. I'm not going to do that again. And I came back after that 5-month period. So it's been about probably 11 months or 10 to 11 months since post-surgery. And yeah, man, my legs were small. I was heavier than I wanted to be. I was out of shape. And I think for a lot of people, that might be their kind of tipping point, where it's like that something like that happens, where for whatever reason they didn't continue their therapy and they never got back into a fitness routine, and then post that they never do again, or they take a long time, and then all of a sudden maybe their weight balloons up, or maybe they just don't feel good anymore. And I think that can be a big impact on people's decision to get into fitness, or also just their fitness in general, because then you come back like, well, I can't do the things I used to be able to do. They'd never finished their PT, so they still have some fear. I know the first time I was squatting after I'd torn my ACL, the first time I got back into barbell squatting, I was like, what the I was just, you're nervous. You're generally very nervous. And it's like, physically you're fine. As far as at that point I was, I'd been back to PT, I'd been back to getting, strengthening that area. Physically I was fine, but mentally you're still not quite there. And so I think that's important to notice as well. There's another barrier that I do want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about it right now. I want to get someone out here that actually knows more about it, and that is just representation. I know that fitness, and especially group fitness, can be a very white space, and it can be a very male-dominated space as well. And so I think it's important to address that as well, where it's like, you also, if you are non-white, and maybe like you're gay, or like you're trans, whatever that is, sometimes you want to find a space that is going to be representative of you. And you don't want to, maybe your needs are different than a space you go to, or maybe you just feel more comfortable having someone that looks like you, that can speak to your experience, lead you through fitness, lead you through that, because that looks different for you. Everybody's idea of fitness is different in the first place, right? Bodybuilder's idea of fitness is going to be different than a CrossFitter's. It's going to be different from someone who does OTF. It's going to be different from someone who strictly does running with some cross training in there. So I think that's really important, as well as representation, right? And so I think that's a big deal. And I'm not going to speak about it too much right now, but I want to make that known, that is very, very important as well. And that is, if that is you and you're listening to this podcast from a white straight dude and you're like, I want to find something that's going to work for me, that's going to better represent me. It's kind of like seeing a therapist in a way, because fitness is inherently physical, right? You're doing something with your body. And a lot of the times, we had Abby on here, my friend Abby Ballum had her on episode 12. And a lot of times that brings up certain emotions for people based on what they've been through, based on who they are. And sometimes you want someone who understands your experience leading you through that process rather than someone who maybe has no idea. No matter how empathetic I am or Corey can be, maybe you don't want us leading through maybe you don't want someone who looks like us or who is us leading you through your fitness experience. And that's no slight to anybody. And that's no slight to us, but that's what you want. And that's what people feel more comfortable with. And that's totally fine. But that's a big barrier to fitness as well. Because if the fitness space around you is all white or is all heterosexual or is all whatever, then that can definitely lead you to a space where it's like, I'm not comfortable joining this place. And so I've got some guests lined up that are going to be able to speak to that on a level that's not my level, a broader level. And I think that's really important as well. But that is something to note, that is a big barrier as well for a lot of people. So with that, probably gonna end things here. You spent at least 40 minutes listening to me talk about this. God, I hope the audio quality, I tested the audio quality a couple different times today because it was really crazy earlier. So I tested a couple different times, and that's why this episode is getting out so late. So hopefully that was good. Hopefully, but if you've been listening to me just talk solo for 40 minutes and you're still listening, hey, thanks, appreciate it. Don't have Corey's witty banter to join up with us today, but wanted this to be a little bit more of a just kind of like list episode, but also something to just kind of look out for and just note that if any of these barriers are have happened to you or are currently happening to you, hopefully you're taking something away from this as saying, okay, well, maybe I have a better strategy for this next time, or maybe I can get through what I'm getting through now. Right, that was kind of the whole goal for this. So appreciate you guys for listening. You can follow us on the Instagrams at Average Bros Gym Podcast. I post a couple reels over there, just some fitness stuff that I've been working on, like exercises that I do to kind of warm up and things like that too. And I want to keep doing that a little bit. My filming in the gym is not on point. Not that I give a shit, I don't fucking care. But I want to make sure that it's at least valuable for y'all to see and to witness. So if you do like those, give them a like, ask for more, whatever you want it to do. You can always DM us there too. So again, Average Bros Gym Podcast on Instagram. You can also send us an email at averagebrosgympodcast@gmail.com. If you have anything that's a little bit more longer form, maybe you have a more detailed question, maybe you have a story you want shared, I'm cool with that, as long as it's relevant to everything that we're doing here. I'd love to share your stories and maybe your fitness routines or something that's helped you. Maybe you get past a barrier that you went through. So email us at Average Bros Gym Podcast. And of course, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. This one has been me just talking to like my reflection, not even the camera. So talking to the camera now. Does this look better? Should I have been doing it this whole time? Maybe. I don't know. Anyways, that was kind of odd. But follow us on all those platforms. Share the pod. I definitely think that makes a big difference as far as just word of mouth and spreading that. So if you like this episode, share with friends of yours. Maybe someone is going through one of these barriers right now and you think this could help them. Hey, send it their way. Otherwise, y'all, appreciate you so much. And we will be back next week with soon episodes. Corey should be back from his trip. He's in Arizona. Not Tucson, Arizona, but Arizona. So give him a shout. And if you don't know why I say it like that, look up Jackie Daytona on YouTube. Jackie Daytona on YouTube, and you'll understand why. So anyways, friends, have a great rest of your day, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks. Bye.